So I read up about the Institute. I read the article and it sounded really great. So I said, okay, well, let me call my insurance. My insurance, by the way, at this time is paying $25,000 to keep my son in Texas per month. So that's every month $25,000 roughly. The Institute is a fraction of that. It's less than 7,000. So I thought, great, great, great. They got to go for this. It's close to home. We can work towards reunification. He can work towards therapy with his siblings that he's hurt. You know, this is his best way to come home. This is all they do. You know, the place he's at, it didn't have a focus on RAD. It was just a bunch of kids and the same treatment for all these children. And I learned in the past that my son doesn't respond to traditional treatment like traditional children do. And my insurance refused to cover it. You know, I tried to do a single case agreement. I appealed their decision 7 different times to try and get them to do it, and they refused. Well, my son was adopted through California. So California has an adoption assistance program. So I asked them to do 2 things. They said, well, could you pay us monthly to have my child in the Institute? And they said no. I said, well, he requires extra care. You know, financially, we need to provide for that care. And they said no. I said, well, can you send him to the Institute? And they said no. They said, we will send him to another residential treatment center if you like. I said, well, that's not really working for us. We have that right now. So I actually took them to court. And Amy helped me with that. I didn't have an attorney, and Amy is by no means an attorney. But she came to court as my RAD advocate. So if the judge had a question about RAD, what RAD means, she would help to clarify things for him. I actually went to court with California twice. And on the second time, the judge granted that California pay for the Institute. Because it's roughly the same price that they would have paid to put him in residential in California. You know, I don't understand why it was so hard to get all this done, to get appropriate treatment. But the judge was very, he grilled the social worker. You know, this is a kid in their care that they want to get help for. Why aren't you helping them? You know, their son has this need and they want him back in their home. You know, why won't you allow this service? You know, and she said, well, they're not a residential treatment center. I said, no, they're not. That's why they work. That's the whole thing. That's why they work. But it was all a licensing issue. That's what it was. It was about, you know, medical coding with my insurance. And with the state of California, it was about, well, they're not licensed as a residential treatment center. No, well, they couldn't do the things they need to do if they were, because that's not what works with these kids. So he went from a residential treatment center where it was loud and there were 12 kids, and sometimes I couldn't even talk to him because there was so much screaming. And it was a good treatment center. As far as treatment centers go, it was a really good one. But when you have 12 boys with these types of issues, you know, some of them violent and aggressive, physical fights every day, you know, he attempted suicide. I wouldn't be able to talk to him sometimes because of all the screaming on his unit. I couldn't hear him. And I had to send him noise canceling headphones because there was so much going on, just kids yelling at staff. And but now, I mean, he's only been at the Institute for a month, but he hasn't had any physical fights. So I attribute that to, 1, he's probably honeymooning, but 2, it's quiet. There's peace. He's in a home. He's not in some facility with 12 kids. He's in a home with a practice mom and a practice dad and little dogs. And it's like he's in a family again, because that's where he struggles, is being in a family. So that's what he needs, is to practice in a family. I don't know. I can't even explain the relief to that, to know that he's in a place where he is actually getting the help that he needs. And I have a team of people that, you know, we meet together. We're on the same page. There's no triangulation. Because when we have therapy, I'm there. You know, his practice dad's there. You know, we've got the therapist over here. We're all on the same page.
What advice would you give to parents when they're trying to get funding for their kids?
Well, when I went to court with California, I think a couple things helped. Claire, who works at the Institute, gave me a list of California counties that already pay for the Institute. That helped a lot because that set a precedence like, okay, California has paid for this in the past. So even though my county was denying it, you know, it's been done before. And the judge saw that and really, you know, what aren't you guys doing? He really questioned the social worker a lot. The second thing was I printed off documentation of what the Institute was, and I gave it to my son's therapist. I gave it to his home therapist and then his therapist in Texas. And they all thought that this treatment would be wonderful. They wrote letters, you know, saying, you know, he should be at this place. So that helped too, that they had letters from the therapist recommending this treatment program.
And then you did a lot of calling, right? You had to call.
I did. People. Yes, I called a lot of people. I spoke with the social workers at the county first. They had 30 days to approve my son's placement, and it actually did not happen in that 30 days. It happened maybe day 35 or 30, I don't know. It happened after. So once 30 days hit, I called her and she said, you know, we're working on it, we're working on it. So I waited and gave her the benefit of the doubt. But around day 35, I started to get anxious. There was one spot left at the Institute, and if we didn't take it at that time, you know, my son wouldn't have been able to get in because he would have been discharged from residential. Because even though his therapists at the residential treatment in Texas were saying it was a medical necessity that he stay there, our insurance said, you know, it's been 6 or 7 months. You know, what's his plan to come home? And that was scary for me because he wasn't ready. He was still wanting to kill us. How can insurance say, you know, we're done paying for this when you still have a child with severe needs, you know, medical necessity? He couldn't come home. He had nowhere to go. So we went ahead and actually placed him at the Institute before the funding actually got approved. The judge had ordered it, but it hadn't gone through yet. So at this point, he's at the Institute, and that's when I started calling, you know, who's your boss? Who's their boss? And I just kept going up to, you know, where's this paperwork? You know, we're past 8:30. Once you say things like, there was a court order, you're in, you know, violation of this court order, they move a little bit quicker. So he was placed here, and the very next day the paperwork came through to Claire. Because I started calling, I was frantic. I called frantic. A lot of crying. If I called and I'd say, oh, I'm the mom that cries, they would know exactly who they were talking to, which is sad. But when you're that desperate for your son, you know, when you don't know if they're going to really kill themselves or not. I was afraid that if he got kicked out, if insurance wouldn't pay for it, that he'd be taken from us. Because when the county first came to us, when we were having problems with our son, they said, your son's not able to live here anymore. And I said, okay, well, we need help. I don't know what to do because I'd never done this. The county said, sign him over to us and we'll take care of him. We'll give him treatment. And I didn't see how signing over rights to my son was an option. Because even though we adopted him, he was my son, and I shouldn't have to give him up to receive care. Because I didn't want him to be another number. He's my kid, and who's going to advocate more for your kid than you are as a parent?
Yeah, it shouldn't be that hard.
No, it shouldn't.
You did it.
We did. We did do it.